Hello there and welcome to this video detailing the basics of chess. In this video I'll be detailing the chessboard and the 6 different types of pieces in chess. I hope you can take something out of this video and use it for your future chess games. So here we have the chessboard that is usually used in every tournament game. It is an 8x8 board with 8 squares vertically and 8 squares horizontally. Chess was originally originated in India, where kings would use it to plan their next move, or just as a leisurely pastime. So when you set up all the pieces on the chessboard, this is what the board looks like. We have the 8 pawns, the 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, 1 queen, and 1 king. I'll be discussing each of these pieces individually in upcoming parts of the video. So first we have the pawn. Which is a most limited capability in any of all chess pieces. It can only move 1 square up at a time. It can only move 1 square up at a time, and can only capture diagonally. Unlike other pieces, the pawns cannot move backwards or capture backwards, which is why it has a limited capability. The next piece we'll discuss is the king. The king has a very similar way of moving to the pawn, where it can move 1 square up and 1 square and diagonally. However, it can move any way it wants, backwards or forwards. And unlike a pawn, it attacks every one of these squares. For example, if you took a pawn, and the pawn would not attack this square. So if you put a king on this square, the pawn would not be attacking it. However, you put a king on this square, the pawn would be attacking it. But it can only attack squares diagonally. The kings go on these specific parts of the chessboard, and in most chess variants, practically all of them except 1 or 2, the setup in chess always remains the same. So pawns go right. All the pawns go on the second rank, right in front of the kings. And on the first move, they have a very special capability, which allows them to move 2 squares up instead of 1 square up, like normal. This means that on the first move, you have an opportunity to gain more space than you would normally. For example, if after a few moves, let's say this, then the pawn could only move 1 square up instead of 2. So that's why you usually want to make use of this first 2 squares on the first move. With any pawn, that is. It can be any different type of pawn. Another special capability the pawn has, probably the most powerful one, is that it can promote when it reaches the 8th rank, which is the rank detailed by the arrow here. So if it reaches the 8th rank, it can promote to any one of these pieces: a queen, a knight, a rook, or a bishop. So most people choose a queen, and since the queen is one of the probably the most powerful piece on the chessboard, that's not a bad option. However, the other pieces can be useful in the specific times. The last special capability the pawn has is called en passant. This is more rarely seen in chess because it doesn't happen that often. But for example, if you did reach this position, then if the pawn moved 2 squares up instead of 1, then this pawn has the capability of just taking the pawn as if this pawn just moved 1 square up. This prevents your opponent from gaining too much space at some times, and can also be used to trick them. The next piece I'm going to discuss here is called the knight. The knight represents the chariot men, and they have a special capability which they can use at any time, which allows them to jump over pieces. Right now there aren't any pieces on the board other than the knight, but when there are, for example here, they can jump over pieces as seen like this, instead of waiting for this pawn and this pawn to move and then going. They can just do it right away. The knight moves in a goes 2 squares up and 1 square sideways, which gives it, or moves in an L shape, which gives it one of the weirdest moving ways of any piece on the chessboard. But this can be very useful when you're moving in a closed position. And the knight can be used in other ways as well, mostly as a supporting piece rather than an attacking one. The next piece I'm going to talk about is the bishop. The bishop is special because the one bishop cannot support the other, because the bishops can only stay on the on a set of one set of squares. For example, the dark squared bishop, the bishop that goes on the darker colored squares, can only stay on the dark squares and cannot move to the light ones at any time. And the light squared bishop can only do the same as well. The bishops move diagonally, which is the main reason why they can't move over to a different colored square. And when working together, though, they can become one of the most powerful pairs on the board. In a chess game setup, this is where the bishops and the knights and pawns would all be. And when you're setting up the board, the pawns, as I said, would go right in front of the king. The knight and the bishop would go right next to the king. And because the queen would be on this square, the bishop and knight on this side go on these specific squares. Next piece I'm going to talk about is the rook. The rook is one of the last pieces to get into the game because of where it resides on the board. However, when it does, it can become very powerful because of the wide capability it has. It can move straight or sideways in any direction, and can capture that way as well, which makes it a very powerful piece. As you see here, the rooks are all on the corners of the board, which makes it very difficult for you to get them into the game. The last piece I'm going to be talking about is the queen, and the queen is, as I said, is the most powerful piece on the board because it has the combined powers of a queen, a rook, and a bishop. This gives it a very wide range and can move diagonally, sideways, straight, any way it wants except the way of the knight. And the queen can also attack anything, but however is very valuable in the game of chess, this is why you usually bring it out later in the game rather than very early where it can get attacked. The queen go right next to the king, and that's their final position. That's the setup. The pawns go right in front of the king. Then the rooks go on the corners. The knights go right next to the rooks. And then the bishops go right next to the knights, and then the king and queen are in the center. Each piece also has a value, regarding points. For example, the pawn is worth 1 point because of its limited capability, but once it promotes into another piece, then it'll be automatically worth more. The knight is worth 3 points, but it can become stronger or weaker depending if the position is open or not, because knights tend to do better when the position is closed, and then it keeps them from getting attacked. The bishop, like the knight, is also worth 3 points, and however, when the bishops are working together, they can sometimes be considered 7 points, because they control a lot of territory and can be very powerful. Okay. The rook is the only piece worth 5 points, due to it's considered stronger than the bishop or knight because it can do well, and it can go to any square of the board and very quickly as well, because bishops can't go to a different colored square. Rooks can, however, and they can provide very useful when checkmating the king. The queen, of course, being the strongest piece, is worth 9 points, which is another reason why you don't bring out the queen early in the game, where it can get attacked and once you take it, you lose those 9 points, and then it's very hard to regain that material, or the point value, because you need a rook, bishop, and pawn to regain the value, or rook, bishop, and rook, knight, and pawn. Or you could have two bishops and a knight, but together they still might not be as strong as the queen because you need to be very coordinated, and the queen can do that in one move. The king, however, is worth the whole game, because once you checkmate the king, which is trapping the queen, you win the game. And then once you checkmate and then there's nothing left to play for. There are also, all the pieces on the board, excluding pawns and kings, are classified into two groups. The knight and bishop are classified into minor pieces due to their point level, perhaps. And then the rook and the queen are considered major pieces because of their wide range and their strength level. I hope you got a lot out of this video, and this encourages you to play chess, and I'll see you next time.